Hey everyone, welcome back to my video blog where I talk about Azure, data platform, and a little bit of personal development. We're going to continue our series today on the modern data warehouse, and we're going to talk about Azure ingestion options as that first stage in any modern data warehouse ELT process. So as we start talking about the modern data warehouse, we change our letters around from ETL, the traditional modern data warehouse process, to ELT, so extract, load, transform. And so that ingestion process would be that extraction phase. And essentially, we're going to break it down into three different operations. And that's going to be a batch load, a bulk load, or a stream load. Okay. And so the first thing we have to think about is when we're doing a batch load process is where is the data originating from, right? And so what are our sources? Essentially, we've got three different types of sources, platforms, which would be on-premises, cloud-based or SaaS applications, and Azure-based storage, right? So any Azure services, other subscriptions, other tenants, those types of things. And, from a batch perspective, it's largely similar to our previous process, where you can use a lot of the same tools that we already have licensing for. The Informaticas and the SSISs and Talons and those aspects still work great on-prem, and they have connectors for a lot of Azure data services. Where we're going to start our data lake process, our data warehouse process is in that data lake. And I would say the vast majority have connectors to Azure Data Lake Gen 2. So you really shouldn't run into any challenges by landing the data for a batch load into a data lake as if you were to land it in some other ODS or something like that. Now, where things are a little different is if you want to have a purely cloud native tool for ETL, or ELT. So say you're building a new data warehouse, or you're re-engineering, re-architecting, rebuilding an existing data warehouse, where you want to get off-prem, you want to remove as many of those servers and services from your premises as you can, and say you don't want to renew your licensing for one of the third-party tools or something like that. When that happens, we start talking about a couple of other products, which first and foremost would be Azure Data Factory, which is a cloud-born orchestration and transformation tool. The transformation tools we'll talk about in part 3 of this when we start talking about data wrangling and things like that. But the orchestration side is very robust, over 90 connectors available. You can go from a lot of on-premises RDBMSs or structured, unstructured, semi-structured sources. A lot of capability there with regard to what you can connect to. It uses this concept of in a self-hosted integration runtime, which for simplicity's sake is basically a gateway that you would use on your premises, install it on a server, and that becomes a proxy with secure connections into your corporate network. Now, you can use this over something like a VPN or ExpressRoute if you so chose. It kind of depends on what your security requirements are and what you need to do with it. But that's a fantastic option for picking up data and landing it somewhere else. From any of the sources, whether it be on-prem, cloud, or other Azure data sources. Okay. Another option in this would be Databricks. So Azure Databricks is a fairly robust compute processing engine that is available to do a whole bunch of different operations. Data engineering and orchestration is just one example. You can also do some data science workloads or some data analytics and those types of things. But it's a very powerful tool that gives you a ton of capability. One of the drawbacks is that if you're new to data warehousing or don't have a Python or a similar background in scripting or coding, they don't have a visual component where you can link things together like Data Factory has, right? So Data Factory allows you to use a graphical user interface and just can cut down the development time if you don't have that in-house capability. So just something to consider there. Databricks is a great tool, has a lot of capability, but does require more of a coding background to be able to do that transformation and orchestration. Another option is HDInsight, which is basically Azure's version of Hadoop. And all of the tools that go along with Hadoop. So in the Hadoop world, you would use a tool like Scoop to do that data orchestration, pick it up from your source systems and bring it over. It also has capabilities for your streaming operations, which we'll talk about in a bit. But again, this is an open source platform that sometimes requires a specialty or experience with. It's not one of your more traditional drag and drop tools that we've kind of grown accustomed to. Again, not saying that it has any downsides, but it really depends on the skill sets you have available to you to build out these environments. Lastly, from a batch perspective, would be Synapse Studio. Now, Synapse Studio is a really exciting new product that we're currently in private preview on. We'll be going to a public preview very soon. But this is going to be a very nice all-in-one interface where you can bring your data in. You can run some compute against it, whether it be SQL or Spark engines. And then you can also do development on reports for like Power BI. Now, Synapse Studio has the ability to use either, traditional SQL querying in that kind of interface, and also you can use notebooks for the Spark clusters and SQL notebooks and things like that. So that one's really exciting. There's some very cool technology that goes with that, and some of the data virtualization pieces, so you can hang off external tables into your Synapse Studio for access and things like that. So there's some really cool capability there, and as that evolves more, I'm sure you'll be hearing about it from me some more as well. Now, flipping over to bulk operations, you've got one really good option for your larger workloads. So pretty much anything over 10 terabytes, and even over a terabyte, you're going to want to make some decisions about what makes most sense with regard to how long it takes the data to get up into Azure. So the data box disk is for the smaller workloads. Essentially, you can get a disk sent to you or a few disks sent to you, move the files over, and then ship them back, and we'll upload that data into an Azure storage location, a storage container for you, whether it be Blob or Data Lake, and then you can consume that data using Data Factory or however you choose. It's pretty much the same pattern for the heavy and the standard data box. It really just depends on what your data size is. The heavy will go up to a petabyte of data. Now, the other two offerings on the data box are the data box edge and the data box gateway. Now, these are the edge is a physical device that sits in your environment that will automatically push data over to your storage container in Azure, and it can also run AI workloads from ML models that are built on your premises. So if you're streaming over IoT data into your Azure through the edge device, you have this ability to look for anomalies, for simpler anomaly detection against existing ML models that are created and developed in Azure, and then the rest of the data can be shipped up to your Azure storage container and orchestrated as need from there. So that one is really cool. It uses FPGAs to be able to run those against those models and flag for those anomalies. And then the gateway is actually a virtual appliance that sits inside of a VMware or Hyper-V work center. And basically that is somewhat of an automated proxy for sending data across and landing it into a storage account of your choosing. So really good options there for bulk loading. Again, you may use a combination of them depending on if you want to send up your initial bulk loading into Azure, and then use like an Azure gateway to pull up additional data down the road. So it kind of depends on what you need there. But the last option is around streaming. Now, I've got another video up here that talks about other ways to stream data into Azure, being IoT Hub, Event Hubs, and Kafka. And so, definitely watch the other video if you're more curious about those and some of the pros and cons. But a couple of new options since I did that last video, or not really new, but different options that I should probably look at as well. One is Databricks. We already talked about that some, right? And so Databricks has some great capability around streaming options. You can stream right through Databricks. You can use Event Hubs in conjunction with Databricks. So there's a lot of capability and options there, and it really just depends on, again, what your requirements are and what needs to happen with that data. Also depends on what those skill sets are that you have in-house. So again, evaluate those as need be, but certainly don't leave that out as an option for your streaming workloads. You can also contain some of your AI and ML functionality within that Databricks cluster, and you can land it into Databricks Delta if you so choose. So a lot of capability there, and definitely suggest to look at your architecture and spend some time with a Microsoft architect or somebody who's got some experience with this to help you architect and design the best solution for your specific workloads. And then the last is again Synapse Studio. So Synapse Studio gives you a lot of capability, and they are going to be bringing in streaming workloads on top of the batch workloads. So you'll be able to connect into streaming pipes, if you will, to be able to bring that data and land it where you need to. Now, for the most part, we're going to land all of this data from all of these sources into Azure Data Lake Gen 2. The reason for that is because, essentially we want to be able to land that data in its rawest form to be able to then do any kind of transformation as necessary after the fact. But having it in its raw form allows you to be able to revert back to the initial data as it landed, and always have basically that clean raw copy that you received in the first place to do kind of error checking or validation and those types of things. So the data lake is the preferred zone to land it into. We generally call that a raw zone or a landing zone. And then there's also the possibility of wanting to land the data into a transactional database, so a traditional SQL database or something along those lines. If you're going from RDBMS to RDBMS, that might make sense. There are pros and cons to each, and there are a lot of discussions around what the better way to go is. Again, it's dependent on your systems. If you know that you will never need any kind of unstructured sources, any kind of streaming sources, any kind of IoT data, anything like that, social data, if you know that you're never going to use that for your data warehouse, then maybe it makes sense to go to an RDBMS system directly. But we'll talk about that more in my next video when we talk about storage options and what is out there and available. I appreciate the time. This video is a little longer, so thanks for sticking with me. I will be sure to put some links in this to reference some of the technologies I talked about. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Like the video if it provided some value. Please subscribe to the channel, and definitely feel free to reach out or throw questions below. Appreciate your time. Have a great day, and thanks again. Bye.